Today I'm going to be talking about 5 drummers that you may not have heard of. They're all extremely influential in their own ways and you should know about them. I'll have links to these drummers below. Hi, I'm Mark Dutram. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a songwriter, guitar player, bass player, composer, and producer. I'd like to thank all of my subscribers and also my Patreon members who support me and enable me to make content like this. If you would like to support me directly, you can also buy me a coffee in the link below. So the first unknown drummer, although he's not really unknown to me and probably quite a few other people, is somebody called Ed Blackwell. And Ed Blackwell came from New Orleans, and he was very influenced by second line drumming, as many of the drummers who come from there are. And second line drumming is kind of marching drumming, and you can definitely hear that in the style of drummers from New Orleans. Ed Blackwell is known for playing with Ornette Coleman, who I did actually get to meet and spend a little bit of time with, which I may go into later. Ed Blackwell played on all the early influential Ornette Coleman albums, as well as some later ones, such as Science Fiction. He also made records with Eric Dolphy, Don Cherry, Archie Shepp, and Alice Coltrane, and he made some really cool records as a band leader. If you want to check out some of the stuff that he did, I would suggest going to the Ornette Coleman little CD box set called Beauty is a Rare Thing, or listen to the album This Is Our Music by Ornette, and you'll get to have a dive into the genius that is Ed Blackwell. I highly recommend that you do. I picked Ed Blackwell to talk about because he's a highly influential drummer that a lot of people are probably not familiar with. And as the drummer for Ornette Coleman, he contributed to a huge leap forward in the vocabulary of jazz. I highly recommend you listen. The second drummer I'm going to talk about, it was actually a street musician. His name was Gene Palma, and he's actually the drummer in the movie Taxi Driver. When Travis Bickle goes on a date with Sybil Shepherd, he walks by a street drummer doing demonstrations of Gene Krupa and Chick Webb, and he was known in the 70s as a street drummer, and he wore kind of this crazy heavy makeup and a lot of almost looked like black shoe polish in his hair, but he demonstrates the style of Gene Krupa and Chick Webb really well. And watch Taxi Driver and you can see him demonstrating this. I think it's on YouTube also. A third drummer that I'm going to talk about that you may not have heard of is a man called Michael Walden. And Michael Walden is an incredible fusion player who played with Mahavishnu Orchestra, Weather Report, and also Jeff Beck, amongst other people. And he actually started playing in Mahavishnu Orchestra when he was 22 years old, which is quite incredible. And I was lucky enough to see him play with Mahavishnu Orchestra twice, once at Nebworth Festival in the UK, and then once actually in Phoenix, Arizona, when Mahavishnu Orchestra did a tour with Jeff Beck in, I think, 1976. But anyway, he's a phenomenal drummer, and he also became quite an incredible producer, producing people like Aretha Franklin, Herbie Hancock, Whitney Houston, George Benson, Lionel Richie, Mariah Carey. If you want to hear quite an incredible example of his drumming, listen to the song Be Happy, which is on side 2 of the Mahavishnu Orchestra album, Visions of the Emerald Beyond. He plays on that entire record, and he also plays on a record called Apocalypse, which was produced by George Martin, who produced all the Beatles stuff, and it's also recorded with the London Symphony Orchestra. So that's quite an epic album in itself. So I suggest listening to both of these albums, Visions of the Emerald Beyond and Apocalypse also, if you want to get a taste of his incredible drumming. The number 4 drummer that you are probably not familiar with is a drummer called Earl Palmer. And Earl Palmer was part of the famous Wrecking Crew in Los Angeles in the 1960s. He's also from New Orleans and also has that great marching style that Ed Blackwell has. He played on an incredible amount of recordings and played with everybody from Frank Sinatra to Tom Waits. He plays on Blue Valentine, I think. He's played with Neil Young, Beach Boys, Little Feat, Dizzy Gillespie, Ray Charles, Phil Spector, and all of the gigantic hits of Little Richard from the 1950s. In 1967, the Los Angeles Musicians Union has him on record as playing at 450 dates in the single year, which is quite incredible. If you want to hear a taste of his playing, listen to Rip It Up or Long Tall Sally by Little Richard, or listen to You've Lost That Loving Feeling by the Righteous Brothers. He played on all of those tracks, and his drumming is phenomenal. He also did something quite incredible, which is to replace the drum parts for the Coltrane drummer Elvin Jones. And Elvin Jones was in a really strange movie in the early 70s called Zachariah, which was billed as the first electric western. And in the movie, the James Gang are playing in this kind of saloon type place. And Elvin Jones shoots a man in a gunfight. He's dressed as a gunfighter, then walks up to the stage, plays this incredible 5-minute drum solo. Unfortunately, the drums were poorly recorded, so the drums did not get on the soundtrack. But what they did was they hired Earl Palmer to replace the drums on the drum track. And it's quite an incredible replacement, because I never even knew about this until years and years later. Even though the Elvin Jones drum solo from Zachariah was lost, it was replaced by an incredible drum solo by Earl Palmer. The last drummer I'm going to talk about that you may not be completely familiar with is Carmine Appice. And he was the incredible powerhouse drummer for Vanilla Fudge in the 1960s, and then the band Cactus. What you might also not know about him is he is the co-writer of the song Do You Think I'm Sexy by Rod Stewart. And he's an absolutely amazing sounding drummer, and he wrote a really cool drum method book called Realistic Drum Method. And one of the awesome things about this drum book is it came with a CD, and on the CD, when you can hear him counting in, he's got this great New Jersey or New York accent, and he counts in 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I recommend seeking out this drum book just so you can get a recording of him doing that exactly. But of course, the drum book in itself is an amazing drum method book. And I highly recommend that to people who are starting out playing the drums, because it's a really cool drum book. If you want to listen to some recordings of Carmine playing, I would recommend You Keep Me Hanging On by Vanilla Fudge, and I would also recommend the song Lady by Beck Bogart and Appice. And he, of course, was the drummer in that band. He is also the older brother of Vinny Appice, who for some reason likes to have his name pronounced differently than Carmine Appice. So figure that one out if you can. Anyway, that's 5 drummers that you may not have heard of, who are all monster players and who you should check out.